Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is on the visitor process in BNI Connect and all of the different things about BNI Connect that help to support the visitor process. Everything from inviting visitors through BNI Connect, through pre-registering visitors for an upcoming meeting, as well as thanking visitors for coming and even following up with visitors after a meeting. There's lots of processes that BNI Connect can assist with and make things a little bit easier throughout the whole process. And that's the things that we're going to go over today. A couple of housekeeping things while people are still connecting to the webinar. Today's webinar is a live webinar, so if you have any questions, please do feel free to ask them as we're going through the material today. The best way to ask questions is through the questions control panel here in the GoToWebinar software. If you type your question in, I'll be able to see it. It'll pop up on my screen, and I'll be able to answer it as we're going through the material today. The webinar is also being recorded. We're scheduled for about 30 minutes worth of content. I know that people have very, very busy schedules and hectic business days, so we like to keep it nice and short and sweet. That being said, if there are questions, I am always happy to stay on as long as there are questions until they are all answered. But the entire webinar is being recorded, including any of the questions at the end. You'll be able to find the recordings in a couple of different places. The first place is on the support site. If you click on this little question mark here in the bottom right or the upper right-hand corner of BNI Connect, that will take you to the support site. On the support site, you'll see chapter training and documentation, and then you'll see a section called recorded webinars. We have the webinars laid out month by month, and you can go through any of the webinars that were held in that particular month and review them. You'll also be able to find all of our recordings up on youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. We have a ton of information up there, from short 3 to 5 minute videos, educational moments, release, new functionality demonstrations, as well as all of the recorded webinars that have happened over the past 1.5 to 2 years or so. All right, so let's get started with today's material. So here's an overview of the visitor process in BNI Connect, and there's 3 distinct phases, at least when it comes to how BNI Connect is involved with the visitor process. There's the portion of inviting visitors, which happens before the meeting. BNI Connect does have a way that allows you to very quickly and easily invite a visitor to your upcoming chapter meeting. A fairly new functionality that came out in about April of 2014 is the ability to pre-register a visitor for an upcoming meeting. This has a couple of great benefits that I'll get into when I show you this part of it. And then there's also the visitor follow-up that happens after a chapter meeting. So we can mark visitors as attended that might have pre-registered. We also can update the POMS report with the information, and there are follow-up emails, both automated emails and emails that you can create as well. By the way, this is one page of a 40 or so page manual. If you would like a copy of this manual when we're done with today's session, you can please send an email to support@bniconnect.com. Again, that's support@bniconnect.com, and we'd be happy to send this manual off to you. So let's take a look at the various parts of this process in BNI Connect. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is inviting visitors. And one of the things that we often struggle with as members is, well, what do we say to visitors in order to invite them to an upcoming chapter meeting? Or, I know where we go to meet for our chapter meeting because I drive there every week, but I don't know the exact address. BNI Connect makes it very easy to just send an invitation that has all of the pertinent information already in it for you. Now, we do this in BNI Connect. First, you have to log in, and obviously this is your first screen that you would see when you log in. What we're going to do is go to Operations. Now, a lot of people have said to me over the years, I don't really know how to find stuff in BNI Connect. I'm not sure where it is. Here's my little cheat sheet for that. Network is all of the social media functions, so the groups and the connections and the testimonials. That's where you'd go to interact with other people in BNI Connect. Operations is where you go to do stuff, where you're going to input things into BNI Connect, and it also has some tools there like this visitor invitation that we're going to show you. Whereas reports is where we pull the information back out of BNI Connect. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the operations section. We're going to go to operations chapter. Now once we get to operations chapter, you'll see a number of options on the left-hand side. And what we want to do is we want to send an email invitation to a visitor. So we're going to go to create email. Now you'll see a couple of different options here. Now Email My Chapter is a pretty good tool just in case you've never seen this before. This allows you to get all the email addresses for the members of your chapter, which you can quickly copy and paste into an Outlook message or Gmail or whatever program you might be using. The second one is the visitor invitation, and this is the one that we're going to look at today. Email visitor invitation. So this is a simple form that we're going to fill out, and what it's going to do is it's going to take the information that we put into the form, and it's going to insert that information into a predefined template in the system, and then send that out as an email. Now, if you'd like to try this out, feel free to invite yourself to your chapter meeting. This doesn't get recorded anywhere in the system. We're not building up a database of email addresses and names and who's sending what. It's just a way to get a branded, compliant invitation out to a potential visitor. So let's say that I was at a networking event. Maybe I was at a Chamber of Commerce after hours or something. I met somebody that might be interested in BNI. And they agreed. They said, sure, please send me an invitation. So what I do is I put their name in here, and let's say it was John Doe from Doe & Co. And we put his email address in. Now I'm going to put my own email address in so that I get a copy of this invitation so you can see what it looks like. And then we put a personal message in. The personal message is going to be the first paragraph of the email. So I'm going to type something that makes this unique, so speaking directly to the person receiving it. So I would say something like, John, it was great meeting you at the networking event. I would love to introduce you to my referral team. Now I'm going to click send, and again it's going to take this information and put it into a template and send it to this email address. Now I should get that in just a couple of seconds. It does send it right away. And here it is. So here's the message that I just created and sent out. So the invitation says it's an invitation. My BNI chapter wants to meet you. It has a nice BNI graphic up here. It addresses it to Dear John. It puts in my personal greeting here. So this first paragraph is the one that I typed in. It was great meeting you at the networking event. I would love to introduce you to my referral team. Then it starts to put in some of the text that's part of the template. But what you'll notice is that it inserts a lot of the pertinent information for you from BNI Connect. So it lets them know that they're being invited to the BNI Burr chapter and that we meet at the Cool Breeze Cafe and that we're located at 11 Snowball Court. We meet on Wednesdays at 5:30 in the evening. It then briefly describes what BNI is. So it lets them know that BNI is a business and professional organization. It also lets them know that they're looking for somebody in their profession. And then it has a call to action. Please let them respond to you, letting them know if they would like to come to the meeting. It then signs it from you and from your company name. Now keep in mind, this message has a reply to address of you. So if somebody hits reply to this, it will go to your email address. And this takes all the guesswork out of inviting a visitor to a chapter meeting. All right, so the next step in the process is now that you've invited a visitor, let's say that you have a visitor that says, yes, you know what, I'd love to come to a chapter meeting. Well, when BNI Connect, you can now pre-register a visitor for an upcoming chapter meeting. Now we do that in BNI Connect. There's two different ways to do this. The first of which is if we're in BNI Connect, if we're logged into BNI Connect, you as a member or as a director can register a visitor for an upcoming meeting. We do this if we're in the operations section by clicking on Manage Visitor, and then we're going to register a prospective visitor. So the add a visitor is for after a chapter meeting. So that's if somebody already showed up, they weren't pre-registered, and usually it's the visitor host that's going to add any visitors that attended a meeting. But what we're going to do is register somebody for an upcoming meeting. So we click on Register a Prospective Visitor, and we just need to fill out this form. So we're going to pick their profession and specialty. So this person is in public relations. And what date are they going to visit? You'll notice that I can only choose future dates. So let's say they couldn't come this week. They were going to be coming on August 6th. And this was John Doe from Doe & Co. I can type in all the address information. Their phone number, and their email address. Email address is a mandatory field because one thing that this does is this starts an email chain. So a number of emails get sent out as soon as you register a prospective visitor. So once I click Submit, the first email that goes out is an email to the visitor themselves letting them know that they are confirmed for that upcoming meeting. And here's a copy of that confirmation. So it gives me a reminder of where it's located, what time, what day. It lets them know that they're confirmed, to make sure that they plan on being there for 90 minutes, and to please bring plenty of business cards. One of the things that this helps to do is that it helps to increase the number of visitors that actually show up to the meetings. Now, I'm sure this has never happened to you, but you invite somebody to go to a meeting. Maybe you're at that networking event. You said, yeah, you know what? Come to my BNI meeting next week. Say, sure, I'll be there. And then all of a sudden next week comes around and they don't show up to the meeting. Just this simple fact that they are registered now for an upcoming meeting and there's a confirmation means that there's now an expectation for them to come to the meeting. So this is a great way to increase the number of visitors. They'll also get an email reminder 2 days before the upcoming chapter meeting. On top of that, your leadership team, so the president, the vice president, and the secretary-treasurer, as well as the visitor hosts, and your chapter director consultant will all get a notification saying that somebody has now registered to visit that chapter meeting. That provides an opportunity for additional follow-up. It gives you the chance to call up a visitor before the chapter meeting saying, hey, it's great that you have registered to come visit our meeting. I noticed that you're in public relations. I can't wait to introduce you to the advertising agent in our chapter. It also gives you the opportunity to do some additional things like prepare some name badges for the visitors that might be coming to that week's chapter meeting. Now, I mentioned that there was a second place that you can pre-register a visitor. So the other place you can do this is on your regional website or even on your chapter website. This is done. So I'm going to go to our Antarctic referrals. This is our special website for the Antarctica region, our test region in BNI Connect. And let's say that I'm a visitor out there and I would like to register myself for a chapter meeting. Or let's say that you're a member and you met somebody at a networking event and they'd like to visit a chapter meeting other than the one that you're a member of. You can register visitors for other chapters this way as well. So we do this by finding the chapter page. So let's say we have somebody that would like to visit the Chili Hillbillies chapter up there in Antarctica. We would click on the button that says Visit this chapter. You can also get there if you go to the chapter website. You'll notice that there's a link for Visit This Chapter on the chapter website. Both of them go to the same place. And the same thing applies here. This form is very much like the form that you would fill out in BNI Connect. We choose the date of the visit, type in their first name, their last name, their company name, phone number, email address, industry and classification. Now, if they don't know their industry and classification, they can check that off and they can type their own in here. They also have the opportunity to write in who invited them. And there is a CAPTCHA code to make sure that there aren't little robots out there registering people for all of our chapter meetings. Once they're registered, the same process happens. An email confirmation gets sent to that potential visitor. And I did just get my Chili Hillbillies chapter meeting reminder here. And the leadership team for the Chili Hillbillies also received notification that I had registered. Now, the great thing about this is, again, you can now monitor the people that are signed up for your upcoming chapter meetings. Now, we do this in a couple of different ways. There is a report that's available where you can see all of the visitors that are registered for your upcoming chapter meeting. Now, again, if I want to see the reports, I'm going to go to Reports. So I'm going to go to the chapter report. And all the way at the bottom, you should see a visitor registration report. By default, it's going to show me the next week's worth of registrations. But if I'd like to, I can expand that out. If I'd like to look through the end of August and see all the people that are registered, I can do that as well. And click Go. And now I can see for the Burr chapter here, we have 3 visitors that are registered for upcoming meetings. We have one that's registered for this week's meeting, one registered for the 6th, and one registered for the 20th. Gives me the phone numbers and the email addresses if I'd like to pre-follow up with any of those visitors. Now, the second place is you can also go to, under the Operations chapter, you can also, if you have permissions to do this, click on Manage Registered Visitors. And this brings us to the next step in the process. So we've gone through the pre-meeting, that is inviting visitors, and pre-registering visitors for upcoming meetings. Now the meeting happens, your visitors arrived, they went through the meeting, and the next step is to make sure that we're recording the visitors that have come to the meeting. Now, if there's any visitor hosts or vice presidents on the line with us today, before, we would always go to Add a Visitor. Well, if you're using the pre-registered visitors function, that process is going to change slightly. The first thing that you're going to want to do is to make sure you go to Manage Registered Visitors. Now, if I know I'm looking for somebody or within a date range, I can do that, and then click Go. And this will show me all of the pre-registered visitors for the Burr chapter up here in Antarctica. So if I'm a visitor host, the first thing I'd like to do is to make sure that I mark attended anybody that has come to the chapter meeting that week. So I can sort this by visit date if I'd like to. I can also choose to show more entries. Now, if visitors didn't show up, Victor Visitor here was scheduled to show up a while ago and he never showed up. I can delete that entry if I'd like to. Or let's say that Victor Visitor called back and said, hey, you know what, I'm sorry, I didn't make that meeting. I'd like to re-register for a different meeting in a couple of weeks. You can go in and click Edit and change their visit date. So let's say they'd now like to come to this week's meeting. It will send them a new confirmation email. It will also re-notify the chapter of this upcoming visitor. But let's say this week's meeting has gone by, so we met last week on the 23rd, and we had a few visitors registered. So we have Jimmy Jones here, who was registered. He actually came to the meeting. So what I'd like to do is to make sure I mark him as attended the meeting. I can verify the details, and you'll notice when I go into edit, one of the options here is visitor attended. So as a visitor host, rather than having to type all the information in again, all the information is already filled in for me. So I can mark them as attended, and I can also choose whether or not the inviting person gets credit in the PALMS report. Now there's a couple of reasons why you might want to uncheck add visitor to PALMS, and that would be perhaps the person has come for a second visit, or perhaps the person is a member of another chapter. When you add visitors to the PALMS report and the inviting member gets the credit for it, one thing that does do is to affect your conversion ratio. So for anybody that's using the traffic lights system to monitor your chapter's progress, conversion ratio is simply the number of visitors that have been marked in the PALMS report versus the number of new members in that same time period. So if you're marking the same visitor in the PALMS report 2, 3, or even 4 times, you'll actually be lowering your conversion ratio. You can verify the rest of these details, make sure that the right profession and specialty is there. And you can notice that you do need to verify who invited them. So I can see that the invited by was chosen as Alfred E. Newman. I can then choose Alfred E. Newman there, verify the rest of the details, and I can also choose to send the visitor a follow-up email. If you'd like to, you can unselect this. Some reasons why you may want to unselect that, again, would be maybe the visitor wasn't qualified for the chapter, or maybe you're doing data entry 2, 3, or 4 weeks later, and it would be a little bit out of form to send a thank you email so many weeks after they had actually shown up to the meeting. Notice that if you do unselect the visitor follow-up email, then the email address will become non-mandatory. I can now click Submit, and this visitor will have been marked as attended. You'll notice that they're removed from the register visitors list, and now they'll be in my visitors database. For anybody that's not in the list that attended your meeting, you can then click the Add Visitor button, which would record a visitor that hadn't pre-registered. Pressing the Add Visitor button is the same as going to Operations Chapter, Add Visitor. But again, visitor hosts, you always want to check the Manage Registered Visitors list first. And finally, we come to Visitor Follow-up. And aside from the automated email saying thank you for visiting our chapter, there's other things that we can do with our visitor database that we now have for our chapter. The first of which is that there are a number of reports in the system. We can go to Reports, Chapter, and look at the Chapter Visitor Report. We can choose a date range. So let's say I'd like to see all of the visitors that have come to our chapter since the beginning of June through the end of July. I can type in names or professions if I'd like to, and click Go. And this will list for me all of the visitors that we've had to our chapter. This is some great information for a couple of reasons. Let's say I'd like to re-invite them back for a second meeting. That would be a great thing to do using this information here. Or let's say that you're having a stack day or a visitor's day for your chapter. One of the biggest reasons that visitors don't come back a second time is simply because they're not asked to come back. So make sure you're following up with your visitors and inviting them back to your chapter meetings. One thing to note about this report is up at the top it says there is further information available when exporting this report. So if I choose to export this report, the thing that you'll notice is that the report does have additional information on it. It includes the full address details if that information was entered when entering the visitor. That's helpful for especially chapters that might be using an alternative follow-up system. For example, if you're using something like send out cards, you can take this spreadsheet and import it into your other follow-up system. And finally, if you're just looking to get the email addresses so that you can send out a blast email to your visitors, you can do that again through this chapter visitor report or under Operations Chapter, Create Email, Email Chapter Visitors. I can choose just specific professions. I can also choose a date range. So let's say that our chapter is having a social event, and I would like to invite all of the visitors that have been to our chapter so far this year to come to our after-hours evening social event. I could click Next, find all the email addresses for the visitors, copy them, and add them to the email. So today we reviewed inviting visitors. We have the ability to send a branded, information-filled visitor invitation email. We have the ability to pre-register visitors for upcoming chapter meetings. We can do that again through BNI Connect, logged in as a member, or through the regional or chapter websites. And finally, we can mark visitors have attended, which sends them a follow-up email. And we can also send follow-up emails by using the reports in the system. All right, we are just about at the bottom of the hour. What I'd like to do is for anybody that does need to leave right away at the bottom of the hour, thank you very much for being here with us today. But I'd also like to open this up for any questions. So I would invite you to please type your questions in at this time, and I would love to answer those questions. They can be about this visitor tool that we have here in BNI Connect or about anything else in the system. I'd be happy to answer those questions. Just a reminder, while you guys are thinking up your questions, all of this is being recorded, and it will be made available on the support site, again, by clicking on this question mark in BNI Connect, or by going to youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. Again, that's youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. You'll find all of our recordings here. And finally, if you could, I would love it if you gave us a like on Facebook, facebook.com/BNI Connect Global. We do announcements and reminders and all sorts of things up here on our Facebook channel as well. All right, so we have a couple of questions that have come up. Ariel says, I'm a new member, very informative session. Thank you for sharing these tools, and you are very welcome. I hope you enjoy using them. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you get to it later, you can always go to support.bniconnect.com and click on Submit a Request, and this will send an email to the support team, and we'd be happy to answer those questions. But thank you for being here. Ray says, what route do you recommend we use for inviting a visitor to a chapter that is not your home chapter? So, Ray, are you a director consultant or are you a member? When it comes to the invitations, as a member, we can only invite people to our own chapters as a member. Part of that is simply because of the way that the system is set up. As an ambassador or as a director consultant, you can invite visitors to any chapter that you have access to in BNI Connect. So if you go to Operations Chapter, I go to Create Email here, it will send an email based on the information of the chapter that is in this drop-down box. Now, as a member, you only have access to this one chapter, but if you are an ambassador or a director consultant, you can choose a different chapter. So I could invite somebody, let's say, to the Frozen Assets chapter by changing the drop-down here. Then it would insert all of the information for the Frozen Assets chapter and put that into the email. Does that make sense, Ray? Does that help? Steve says, thank you, got to go, but always appreciate your time, and you are very, very welcome, Steve. Thank you for being here. Keith says, can you find people who have visited other chapters? For example, if someone went to another chapter but did not join, the place was taken, bad time, bad day, so that you can invite them to your chapter. Keith, that can be done on a regional level. As a member, we cannot mine that information for other chapters. However, if you ask your director consultant or your executive director, they can certainly help you to find that information so that you can your directors do have the ability to search the visitor lists of all of the chapters in the region. So again, if you're a member, you're not able to do that for other chapters. However, your director consultant can help you with that. Does that help, Keith? Let's see. Ariel says, can we get CEU credits for this webinar? Absolutely. Ariel, what you need to do is go back to your home screen, click on Submit CEU Slips, and make sure you give yourself 1 credit on the second line here for a BNI webinar, and click Submit. And you can submit a CEU credit for today's webinar. Dale asks, is there a form for visitors to sign in, or does this replace it? So if you'd like your visitors to sign in, what I would suggest doing is you can see if your region has one, but you can also print out that reports chapter visitor registration report. And what I would recommend doing is, again, you can just print this out the way it is. We don't have anybody registered for Frozen Assets. But you could also export this to Excel and then make some slight modifications, like put a blank column in there in order to have a checkbox, let's say, for them to sign in. So does that help, Dale? I mean, you always want to have a regular sign-in form, though, because not everybody will be pre-registered for the meeting. Let's see, Debbie says, using this translates that BNI is a very professional organization, and I would like to encourage members and chapters to use it more. Suggestions for getting more usage. Debbie, are you a director consultant or ambassador? So what I would say is, if you want to email me a copy, I can email you a copy of that, of the actual help manual on this that goes over the whole process. But what I would say is that, especially when it comes to pre-registering visitors, to make sure that when you're inviting visitors for other chapters that you input them as a test, maybe even for your next director visit that you're going to some of your chapters, maybe input yourself as a visitor in the chapter, even though you're not a real visitor for the chapter, but pre-register yourself so that the leadership team and the visitor hosts can see what a registered person looks like. And then, of course, you can always do a 10-minute presentation on it or something at the chapter. Does that help at all, Debbie? Excellent. I think that was the last question that I had here. Oh, hold on a second. We have another one. Ariel says, not about the webinar, but I was wondering, where do we find and read SuccessNet for CEUs? What you want to do is go to www.bnisuccessnet.com, www.bnisuccessnet.com. That will take you to the SuccessNet website. You can read it here if you'd like to, and you can always subscribe if you're not already in the upper right-hand corner and typing in your email address. So again, that's bnisuccessnet.com. Debbie says, can you email the help manual? Debbie, just because I'm going to lose that email address as soon as I close out of the webinar, can you please send an email to support@bniconnect.com and say, please email me the manual, or of course just go to support.bniconnect.com. So go to support.bniconnect.com and click on submit a request. And just put in the description, please send the visitor manual. We'd be happy to do that. All right, that was the last question I have listed here. Does anybody else have any additional questions? I'd be happy to answer those. All right, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. By the way, a good referral for me is to please let other people know about the upcoming webinars. We will be posting the August and September series of webinars very soon, but we do have one final webinar left this month, and that is maintaining your chapter website. You'll always find the upcoming webinars up on the support site as well as on your regional event calendars. So please do check it out, and please recommend these webinars to your fellow chapter members. We do a complete series of all the different topics on a monthly basis. Again, everybody, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Happy connecting, everyone.